I was picking a cake flavor for my wedding when my mother shattered the room. Ordinary Saturday, sample forks, soft music. Then Carla, my mother, leaned across the bakery table and hissed that she'd ruin any ceremony that didn't center her. I laughed, a reflex I learned as a kid. She didn't. Her ringed fist flashed. It stopped inches from my face because the baker screamed and my fiancé Jonah stepped between us. I walked out without the cake and without my mother. That choice saved more than a wedding. It saved a life, my daughter's. To understand why I'll never let Carla near my child, you need to know what happened long before the frosting and flowers. My name is Nora. I'm 27. Carla is 49. Mark, my stepdad, is the kind man who taught me to change a tire at 12 and then missed every band concert because he worked 2 jobs. I have 2 sisters, Ava, 22, who collects plants, and Piper, 19, who collects goodbyes. We grew up in a beige rental that always smelled like lemon cleaner and panic. The panic started the year Carla's car spun on black ice and tapped a guardrail. The crash was minor. The damage came in bottles. The doctor sent her home with painkillers. Real pain, real relief, then real hunger for more. At first, she counted pills out loud, proud of her discipline. Then she hid them and forgot her lies mid-sentence. She overdosed on her lunch break in the dental office bathroom. The hygienist found her. They let her go that day. She came home with a smile like a cracked plate and a story about jealous coworkers. I was in 7th grade. I believed what made life quieter. After she lost the job, mornings were minefields. She drove me to school because it made her feel useful. Every red light was a review of everything wrong with me. My jeans looked cheap. My hair was boy hair. My laugh was too loud. My silence was sulking. I learned how to fold myself small in the passenger seat, stare straight ahead, and breathe through my nose so she couldn't say I sighed. Mark left before sunrise and returned after dark. By the time he got home, Carla was soft-voiced, attentive, a hostess with a reheated casserole. She became an actress for him. I became the audience who knew the script. When I was 14, we went to a family dinner at a busy diner, chrome napkin holders. The smell of onions, the low clink of ice in glasses. Mark was there. So were my sisters, my grandparents, my Aunt Mara, and my cousin Tasha. It was loud, safe loud. Carla started telling a story about Tasha's friend's dad, who forgot to send out birthday invitations. I corrected one small detail. The friend, not the dad, had the envelopes. I didn't even finish the sentence. The punch came from nowhere. Closed fist. 2 quick hits across my cheek and nose. The diner went silent like the power cut out. I tasted blood. Mark caught Carla's wrist before a 3rd swing, his chair scraping hard. Aunt Mara hauled me to the bathroom with a wad of napkins pressed to my face. I stared at the pink swirl in the sink and felt a strange calm, like I was watching a movie of someone who looked like me. That night, Tasha called Child Protective Services. A social worker visited, drank the tea Carla offered, and praised our cozy home. I learned the difference between help and paperwork. When I got my period at 15, Carla held a little ceremony in the kitchen. She pinned a brooch to my shirt and announced I was a woman now, and women don't run around. She pulled me from track and from choir. She said running made girls hard and singing invited attention. The extra hours became empty hours. I ate to feel full. I gained weight. Carla adapted her insults without missing a beat. Repulsive, she'd say, smiling down at her phone. No man will love that. Mark started working even later. I developed a talent that looked like disrespect. I learned how not to hear her. I could study with Carla standing in the doorway, calling me names, and not register a syllable. When she realized the silence insulated me, she changed tactics. She lurked outside my room for the sound of a doorknob. She followed me down the hall to the bathroom. If you hate yourself so much, she'd whisper, "Why are you still here?" I kept walking. I counted tiles. I learned the exact number of steps from my desk to the sink. I graduated high school with a scholarship and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I took a job in patient registration at a hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I loved the ordered clatter of keyboards and the way people soften when you say their name kindly. I reconnected with an old friend, Milo, who lived 3 streets over and also wanted out. We toured cheap apartments for fun, taking photos of peeling paint and pretending we were picky. Secretly, I was counting what I owned that would fit in a single suitcase. Carla noticed my happiness like a dog hears thunder before it breaks. She pushed harder, she commandeered my laundry basket and found a shirt that wasn't mine, then accused me of stealing. She accused me of things because it kept her busy. I stayed quiet because it kept me safe. The day everything shifted was small. Late afternoon. Mark wasn't home. Ava had a group project. Piper was at practice. I walked in from a long shift and saw Carla in my room bent over my dresser. She wasn't looking through it. She was planting. A prescription bottle slid under a stack of folded t-shirts with the care of someone setting a trap. She didn't know I was in the doorway. She was talking to herself. She called me a curse under her breath and said the hospital would love this. If those pills ended up in my locker, I'd lose my job, my reference, and the career I was building, one patient wristband at a time. The doorbell rang. Milo. He'd picked me up for apartment hunting a dozen times. He heard Carla before he saw me. Her voice was the old voice, the one from the car sharpened by rage and medicine. Ungrateful, she spat. You owe me your whole life. I stepped past her, opened the front door, and walked out with my purse and my dignity. Carla followed, shouting about respect. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Milo's face went pale. He put his hand on my shoulder and said gently, Don't go back inside. We drove. No music, just the hum of the old Civic and the sound of my breath finally coming from my chest instead of my throat. We toured 2 apartments and then a third with a crooked balcony and a working deadbolt. The manager slid a lease across a worn desk. I read every word. Now he asked. I looked at Milo. He nodded. I signed. My legs were trembling, but my signature was steady. I went back that night with a friend's SUV and 2 trash bags. Carla sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, tapping a spoon against a mug. She didn't look at me. Mark looked wrecked. I took my clothes, my old trumpet, a box of photos, and the plant Ava had given me. Piper pressed a bracelet into my hand before Carla could see. I didn't take the dog. My new lease forbade pets, and Carla knew it. She smiled at that. The front door closed behind me for the last time. On the porch, the air felt different. Big. Possible. My phone buzzed. Jonah, then just a friendly coworker from radiology, had texted me a stupid meme about hospital coffee. I laughed alone on the steps in the dark. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last laugh for a while. Escaping is a beginning and an ending at the same time. In the new place, the walls were off-white and honest. My neighbors said hello without prying. The complex had a small gym with a stubborn treadmill and a rack of mismatched dumbbells. I started walking, then running. Weight fell away like wet clothes. I made a habit of sleeping with my keys on the nightstand. I used the deadbolt every time. I learned which floorboard creaked in the hallway so I could avoid it. Safety doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in small, boring rituals. For a year, I didn't tell Carla my address. Peace grew in the silence. I made friends at the complex. I started saying yes to birthday dinners and Saturday hikes. I met Jonah at a vending machine when he cursed at a bag of pretzels that refused to drop. We laughed. He asked me to coffee. I said yes and meant it. 3 months later, my grandmother, Nani Ruth, called to say Carla missed her girl and wanted to meet my new boy. I was weak. I wanted to believe in apologies. I agreed to a slow reconnection. The first call with Carla was a trap disguised as love. She cried about the dog I abandoned. I reminded her I couldn't have pets. She said good daughters find a way. I kept my voice even. She wanted to visit. 10 minutes into the visit, she asked to use the bathroom. 15 minutes later, I found her in my bedroom, rifling through drawers. Same careful hands, same trap instinct. I told her to leave. Mark didn't argue. He took Carla by the elbow and steered her out. I put a new lock on my bedroom door that afternoon. You already know where this is heading. Toward a wedding, Carla tried to hijack. Toward a reception, she crashed. Toward a newborn, she'd call hers. But before any of that, there was a choice at a bakery and a decision at a desk with a crooked balcony view. Tomorrow, I'll tell you how Jonah became my family. How Becky, sorry, Tasha nearly paid the price for loving me. And how I learned that some doors don't need locks. They need to stay closed forever. Would you have signed that lease on the spot too? Mornings in the crooked balcony apartment were quiet in a way I didn't trust at first. The refrigerator hummed like a nervous singer. Pipes clanked behind the shower wall exactly 3 seconds after I turned the knob. I'd lace up my shoes and run until the sky went from gray to forgiving. On the sidewalk, I learned the rhythm of my own breath again. Inside, I learned the sound of a key turning that belonged to me, not to her. Jonah folded into my life without pushing anything out. He had calm hands and a talent for fixing small things, sticky drawers, squeaky hinges, the wobble in my thrifted table. There he'd say, stepping back like a mechanic, admiring a rebuilt engine. We didn't rush. Coffee after shifts became walks after coffee, then dinner at the taco truck behind the hospital. He met Mark by accident in the parking lot outside a hardware store. Mark was juggling a bag of rock salt and a coil of garden hose. Jonah reached for the hose. Mark nodded the kind of nod men use when they're not sure if it's safe to smile, but want to anyway. Later, Mark texted me. He seemed solid. Solid was high praise in our family. We grew up building with unstable materials, false promises, hidden bottles, moods that changed with the weather. A steady person is a miracle. You test 15 different ways before you let yourself believe in it. Carla didn't call for months. Then my grandmother, Nanny Ruth, phoned with a tone that tried to be casual and failed. She's mellowed, Nanny said. You should bring your young man by for Sunday dinner. No pressure. Nanny used no pressure the way salesmen use limited time. I said I'd think about it and thought about it for exactly a week. Memory and hope wrestled. Hope won by 1 vote. We went. Jonah brought a pie. I brought a plan to leave if anything felt off. Carla answered Nani's door with an expression I had never seen on her face, hunger without food. My girl, she said, and hugged me too tightly. She smelled like good perfume poured over sour breath. She hugged Jonah too long. You must be the saint, she joked. Her eyes were sharp, brilliant as cut glass. Dinner began fine. Roast chicken. Nani's mashed potatoes with too much butter. Carla asked Jonah polite questions about his work and told a few stories that skimmed the truth but didn't actively harm it. Then she asked to use the bathroom and vanished for 14 minutes. I timed it because people who've been hurt learn the weight of minutes. I excused myself, and found her in Nani's bedroom. Not the bathroom, leaning over the dresser, with my purse open on the quilt. Her fingers were in my wallet like they owned it. She looked up and smiled so bright you could almost believe you walked in on a magic trick. I dropped a ring, she lied, eyes flicking past me to the doorway. She never looked guilty. She looked inconvenienced. Leave, I said, 2 syllables, clean. Back in the dining room, I kissed Nani's cheek and thanked her for dinner. I told Jonah I'd meet him at the car. Carla followed all apologies, calling me dramatic. On the porch, I saw the old storm brewing in her. She hated not owning the room. She hated being caught. She hated me for noticing both. That night, Mark called. He rarely called at night. I'm sorry, he said. No explanations, no defense, just sorry. Mark was the validator of my private reality in a house where I'd been told my reality was poor taste. You're not wrong, he added. You're not crazy. Hearing it out loud loosened something tight in my chest. It also sharpened a question I'd been circling since I moved out. Why are you still there? He cleared his throat. Because Ava and Piper are, he said, voice small. Until they're not. Ava and Piper were lines I would not let Carla cross. They still lived in the house with the lemon cleaner smell and the doors that weren't really doors, because privacy there was a performance, not a right. Ava texted me photos of new leaves on her pothos. Piper texted me empty locker rooms and late-night drive-through receipts. I visited them in public places. I never gave them my address in a text. Breadcrumbs matter when foxes read your messages. Life steadied. I worked. Jonah studied for a certification exam he'd put off during a rough year with his own family. We went to a friend's trivia night, where I learned Jonah knows far too much about 80s movie soundtracks. We laughed. I slept through the night most nights. I almost believed the worst had already happened. Then love grew roots. He proposed on a Tuesday because he didn't want the moment to be staged like an ad. He took me to the little park with the broken swing we'd fixed together, handed me hot chocolate, and said my name in a voice that made the world quiet. The ring wasn't huge. It was honest. I said yes. I still can't describe the exact expression that crossed Jonah's face. Relief, maybe, like holding your breath for years and finally exhaling without coughing. We planned a small wedding that would not bankrupt us or feed anyone's ego. We chose a date in a bakery and a list of people who had earned chairs in our lives. I called Nani with the news. She squealed like a teenager and promised a quilt. I called Mark. He said he'd be there and meant it. Then I called Carla because some obligations feel like ropes tied to old anchors, even when you've cut 100 other ropes. She barely let me say we're engaged before she asked who was in the wedding party. I told her I wanted Tasha, my cousin Aunt Mara's daughter, to be my maid of honor. Silence, then a laugh with no humor in it. Tasha had been the family cautionary tale for years. Pills, bad boyfriends, rehab. She'd clawed her way back with stubborn grace, working double shifts and going to meetings in church basements that smelled like coffee and resolve. She had a little boy, Micah, who called me Rora because he couldn't quite say Nora, and I never corrected him. Carla hated Tasha in a way that felt personal and ugly. Over my dead body, she said, crisp as ice, "If that thief stands near you in white, I'll drag her out by her hair." I could hear the old rumor machine cranking Tasha stole from me. Tasha poisoned my family. Tasha is the reason for everything. When I was a teenager, Carla leveled those same accusations at me, and I believed enough of them to walk around bent. "Then don't come," I said, resting my hand on the countertop. "Because anger makes you lightheaded if you don't ground yourself." She scoffed. She called me ungrateful. She warned me I'd miss her when she was gone, as if threats disguised as prophecy would bend me. I hung up while she was mid-sentence. The sound of ending a call on an abuser is a small, clean blade in the hand. I didn't tell Tasha about the threat right away. She was working hard for quiet, and I didn't want to hand her my chaos. But Mara called me that night anyway, voice low. "Nora, she's rattling the family phone tree," she said. "If you want Tasha as maid of honor, I'll walk her down the aisle myself." She paused. "And I'll bring pepper spray." Mara's humor always wore a steel core. She's the one who pulled me into a diner bathroom with bloody napkins in her hand years ago. She's also the one who told the truth, even when the truth put her on the wrong side of family dinners. In our messed-up constellation, Mara was the revealer. She didn't just confirm my suspicions, she dragged them into the light so other people had to see them too. Jonah and I tried to keep planning around the landmines. We picked a small garden venue. We chose simple vows because flowery words felt obscene after the life I lived. We sent save the dates only to people we trusted. I bought a dress that made me feel like myself instead of a costume. We scheduled a tasting at the bakery. That's where Carla showed you the bone-deep truth again. She arrived to help trail of perfume ahead of her and turned a cake consult into a hostage negotiation. When she raised her fist in that room and Jonah stepped between us, the future rearranged itself. I walked out, breathing hard embarrassment hot in my throat. People had seen, people had gasped. Part of me wanted to go back and apologize to the baker for the scene, as if a maniac mother were something a daughter could tidy with napkins and a tip jar. Instead, I sat in Jonah's car and watched steam fog the windshield every time I exhaled. I was not a child in a passenger seat anymore. I could decide to end this permanently. We eloped 3 weeks later. Not out of romance, though, there was plenty of love in the room, out of strategy. We did it in a park at sunset with a friend ordained online and Jonah's parents as witnesses. His mom, Camila, cried softly and handed me tissues like she'd been training for the job my entire life. His dad, Eric, shook Jonah's hand and then pulled me into a hug that smelled like cedar and barbecue smoke. It was simple, no aisle, no cake, no mother, just two people promising to be a shield for each other. We told family after. I braced for impact. Carla exploded exactly the way I expected, accusing wailing, calling me names that belonged to someone else long ago. She said I did it to spite her. She said I ruined her chance to be seen. She never once said she was happy I found someone safe. Mark texted me a confetti emoji and then proud of you. Ava and Piper spammed me with heart stickers. Nani sent a photo of quilt squares laid out on her bed like a patchwork roadmap. Tasha dropped off a bouquet at my apartment door with a note that said, "You kept your soul." That's the real wedding. A month later, Camilla suggested a reception. No bouquet toss, no speeches, she promised. Just food and music, so the people who love you can say it out loud. I wanted that. I wanted a night that wasn't about survival or strategy. We picked a date in a small event space near their house. We planned an open house-style gathering so people could come and go. To minimize the chance of an explosion, I called Tasha and asked her to swing by early. With Micah, give me a hug, and slip out before the room filled. She agreed. I'll wear sneakers for speed, she joked. Then I did the careful thing I still hate doing. I phoned Carla as a courtesy. I told her there would be a reception 2 Saturdays from now. I told her she was welcome if she could behave. I also told her Tasha would be stopping by at the start. Carla went silent long enough that I thought the call had dropped. If she sets one foot inside, Carla said eventually, I'll make you regret it. The tone was the one she used when I was 15, and she stood outside my bedroom door discussing whether the world would be better without my particular arrangement of molecules. I felt 14 again, and also very far from 14. Then, don't come, I said. If you show up to hurt anyone, security will escort you out. I hung up. I blocked her number for the night because shaking sometimes requires silence. Tasha called later with her own confession. Mara said she threatened me again, she began. You need the full picture, Nora. She took a breath. Back when I was using Carla and I crossed paths. She wasn't just concerned aunt dropping by with soup. She was a client of my dealer. We shared a bathroom in a stranger's apartment more than once. The line crackled. She hates me because I know what she was and I got out. The floor tilted under me. Not because the information shocked me, my body already knew, but because hearing it spoken turned a rumor into a brick. Tasha lowered her voice. If she decides to make trouble, she won't stop at words. She paused. Lock your life down, Rora. I mean it. The nickname made me laugh and cry at the same time. I'm on it, I said. After the call, I bought an extra camera for the back door and texted the event space to ask about their security protocol. The manager assured me they had staff at the entrance the entire time. I put their number in my phone, as if emergencies would behave if I organized them neatly. I also called Mark. I didn't ask him to choose. I already knew the choice he made every day until my sisters were free. I just told him what was planned and what I feared. He listened. She'll try something, he said, weary certainty in his voice. I'll be there early. He paused. I've started looking for an apartment, he added, surprising me. Piper's almost out. Ava's close. I'm done being her handler. Hope flared so bright, it hurt to look at directly. I didn't say you should have left years ago because I knew why he hadn't. I said, tell me if you need help with deposits. He laughed, a sound like a man remembering he has a right to ask for things. In the days before the reception, little oddities began stacking up like sticks in a dam. A blocked call at midnight that hung up when I answered. A neighbor mentioning a woman in sunglasses circling the parking lot in the middle of a rainstorm. An envelope in my mailbox with no return address, holding a clipping about grandparent rights, a thing Carla once threatened with the confidence of someone who had never read a statute. I kept each piece, not because I wanted souvenirs, but because I've learned that patterns are easier to prove when they have dates attached. Jonah stayed steady. He's good at steady. He didn't tell me I was overreacting or insist that love can fix anything. He verified the camera angles, moved the pepper spray from the junk drawer to the front pocket of my bag, and set the event to private on social media so it wouldn't pop up in anyone's feed. One day, he said, tightening a screw on the baby gate we'd purchased for our stairs. Even though we didn't have a baby yet, this will be a funny story we tell about over-preparing. I kissed him for saying one day, as if tomorrow were guaranteed, and we deserved to witness it. Camilla sent over a menu the night before the party and asked if we wanted to add a father-daughter dance, even though there hadn't been a wedding. Only if Mark is comfortable, I said, already knowing he would pretend he wasn't, and then do it anyway. Eric rented a portable speaker and a microphone I promised not to use for speeches. Ava offered to make a photo board, which scared me a little because our childhood pictures are a museum of weird haircuts, but she curated with kindness. Piper texted me a screenshot of a playlist she titled, No Sad Songs. Small acts stacked into a scaffold I trusted. On the morning of the reception, Tasha arrived at my apartment with Micah in a dinosaur hoodie and a bakery box from a place across town that pipes frosting like it's their native language. She hugged me, and I felt how much she wanted this to be normal. We cut small slices and ate standing up because sitting felt too slow for a day like that. Before they left, Tasha squeezed my hands. "You built a life," she said. "Protect it." I promised I would. We pulled into the event space lot early enough to see the staff setting out candles in glass cylinders that made the room look like it had moonlight on the floor. I did a loop with Eric to learn the exits and where the security guard liked to stand. He didn't roll his eyes at me for asking. He pointed. He said, "We'll take care of you." I wanted to believe that sentence. I wanted to believe people would step in and say enough when enough arrived wearing perfume. Mark texted here. His car door slammed with the sort of finality I wish I could bottle. He straightened his tie in the reflection of the window, like a man adjusting to a life that might actually fit. Ava and Piper piled out of the back seat, arguing about whether the balloons were too much. Camilla met us at the entrance with a hug and a look that said she'd count heads at the door like a bouncer if she had to. The room filled with faces that felt like safety. At 2:15, Tasha slipped in with Micah, handed me a small wrapped box inside a silver charm shaped like a tiny shield, and kissed my cheek. "We'll duck out the side," she whispered, waving at Mark from across the room. Micah did a little dinosaur stomp for Jonah, and then made the exact sound a 3-year-old imagines a T-Rex makes. Everyone laughed. I thought maybe we'd pulled it off. Maybe monsters die if you stop feeding them your attention. At 2:27, my phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I let it ring. It buzzed again. Another number. I flipped it over and Jonah laid his hand over mine. "We're here," he said. Camilla turned east to me music up a smidge. Eric guided an elderly neighbor to a chair. Mark hovered near the entrance, like a man who had spent years watching doors, and finally understood why. At 2:31, there was a rustle at the front. A shape in the doorway. The air changed the way it does right before a summer storm rolls across a field. I couldn't see her face yet, only the outline against daylight. But my skin recognized her before my eyes did. I took a breath that didn't quite make it all the way in. The figure in the doorway shifted, and the light behind her made a jagged halo. I didn't need to see her face. My skin knew first. Carla. She wore oversized sunglasses, even though we were indoors. Her lipstick was the red she saved for scenes. The scent hit me from 10 feet away, floral perfume thinned with something sharp, like mouthwash poured over vodka. She smiled wide, the kind that shows teeth, but no warmth, and tried to slip past the security stand as if she were expected. Eric stepped forward. Mark was already there, one hand up, palm out, the way you stop a dog from bolting. The guard, a tall woman with her hair in a tight bun, said, "Invitation." Carla laughed in her face. "I'm the mother," she replied, as if the word were a lifetime badge. She spotted me and turned the brightness up. "Nora, sweetheart, you forgot to tell them I'm family." Her voice carried nimble as a dancer. Conversations near the entrance thinned into careful silence. "I didn't forget," I said. "You're not on the list." The glasses came off. Her eyes were glassy pupils too wide. "You think you can keep me out of my daughter's celebration?" She leaned on the last word. My chest tightened. The old game. Rename an event to make it belong to her. Jonah moved to my side, not touching me, just close enough that I could feel his steadiness. The guard repeated, "Invitation." Carla's smile died. "Get out of my way." Mark didn't raise his voice. "Carla, leave!" 3 words, flat and final. They sounded like a man stepping out of a shadow. She tried to push past. The guard and Eric formed a human comma. Carla's shoulder bumped the stand. A candle trembled in its glass cylinder. I thought about the envelopes in my mailbox, the car circling the lot in the storm, the midnight hang-ups. None of it had been random. It had been rehearsal. "You know who else is here," Carla said, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "Thieves! Liars! That little cousin of yours, the one who—" "Tasha left," I cut in. "You can't hurt her today." The look that flashed across Carla's face was ugly and fast. She'd come ready to drag an old secret into the open. Denied an audience, she reached for a new target, me. She raised her voice so the room could hear. "This is what you do," she declared, pointing at me. "You cut people out. You eloped to humiliate me. Now you're throwing this fake party to pretend you're normal. You'll regret this when you have a baby and need help." There it was, the threat wrapped in a prophecy. A few heads turned. Most eyes stayed on their plates out of kindness. Camilla adjusted the music louder by a single notch. Jonah didn't flinch. Mark took one step closer to Carla until she had to tip her head back to keep eye contact. "Go," he said. For a second, I saw the teenage version of me trembling in a diner bathroom, holding wadded napkins to a bleeding nose, while Mara whispered, "It's not your fault." The room tilted past, and present child and adult all stacked on top of each other like plates in a sink. The guard touched her radio. "Ma'am," she said to Carla, her tone crisp, "you're trespassing. If you stay, we'll call the police." Carla stared her down, daring anyone to blink. The seconds stretched. Then she laughed again, but the sound broke at the edges. "Fine," she sneered. "Keep your shabby little party. I wouldn't be caught dead here." She pivoted on a too-high heel, stumbled, caught herself on the doorframe, and stalked out into the afternoon. The guard exhaled. I realized I had been holding my breath. Jonah's hand found the center of my backlight, and sure. Eric reset the candle. Camilla moved through the room, checking faces, pouring water, normalizing the air. Mark didn't move until the door finally clicked shut. When he turned back to me, something in his face had rearranged. "Dance with me," he asked. Voice rough. I blinked. He hates dancing. I nodded. We stepped into the small, cleared space, and Camilla, who always knows the right thing without being told, cued a soft song. We weren't graceful. The first few steps were clumsy. Then Mark's shoulders dropped, and mine did too. He leaned down. "I'm done," he whispered. "I'm filing." "Apartment's already lined up. I couldn't look at you today and not choose." The room blurred. Not from sadness from a release so sudden, my eyes watered. I nodded against his shoulder. We finished the song under the kind of applause people offer when they understand they're watching a private decision happen in public. I hugged Ava and Piper. Ava's eyes were bright. Piper grinned like the teenager she finally got to be. Nani slipped in late, pressed a card into my hand, and left just as quick, murmuring that she didn't want to make trouble. I didn't ask how she knew the time and place. In my family, information travels on unseen rails. The rest of the reception was ordinary in the best way. People ate. They told stories that didn't hurt. Eric made a gentle toast to new starts. Camilla handed out foil-wrapped leftovers, like a general distributing rations. When it was over, we stacked chairs and collected stray napkins with the giddy exhaustion of people who survived the thing they feared. That night, the house was quiet. Jonah fell asleep with his hand on my ankle. I lay awake and replayed the doorway in my head, the way Carla's voice filled the room, the way Mark refused to move. I knew what came next. Carla doesn't hit once. She comes back with a different fist. 2 weeks later, a nurse measured my pulse and said, "You're about 8 weeks." The ultrasound made a sound like a moth against a lampshade, fast, delicate beyond logic, and every part of me tightened and softened at the same time. After the loss last year, I had trained myself not to glue hope to anything early, but the flicker on that tiny screen attached itself to me without asking permission. "Healthy so far," the doctor said, smiling. "We'll watch you closely given your history." Jonah squeezed my fingers until I remembered to breathe. In the parking lot, we sat a few minutes silent and grinning at nothing. When we got home, I didn't call anyone. Not yet. I wanted the secret to live in one room of the house for a day before it had to make space for other people's opinions. We told Mark first after a Sunday dinner, where he brought over a toolbox for no reason and hung 2 shelves I'd been ignoring. He stared at the ultrasound photo like it contained a map he'd lost years ago. A granddaughter, he said, voice reverent, and then laughed because we hadn't told him the sex. A grandbaby, he corrected. Ava screamed and cried and danced in a circle. Piper filmed us and threatened to post it until I bribed her with leftover pie. We asked them not to tell Carla. They promised. I trust them. I do not trust their phones traveling through hands like postcards. The leak came from where leaks always come from in our family, soft hearts and long habit. 3 days later, Carla began texting from a number I didn't recognize. The messages were whiplash. One moment she declared she had rights as a grandmother. The next, she accused me of denying her human dignity. When I blocked the number, new ones popped up within the hour. Jonah installed an app filter, and my phone went quiet again. Silence didn't mean peace. The next day, a bouquet arrived at my office, lilies and roses, and a handwritten note in Carla's careful handwriting for my first granddaughter. I handed the vase to the volunteer desk with a smile that felt like a disguise and asked them to give it to someone else. That afternoon, security called. "There's a woman in the lobby asking for your department," the guard said. "Says she's family." I described Carla. "We've got her." The guard replied, tone crisp. They escorted her out. My hands shook for an hour after. I didn't cry. I went to the bathroom and washed my hands too long. 3 mornings later, I stepped outside to a flat tire. I crouched side and then saw the other 3. All down. Clean cuts, no sticky note, no message, just the work itself. Our camera facing the driveway had picked up motion near midnight. A hood pulled up, the outline of a woman small and hunched. The footage wasn't clean enough to take to court. It was clean enough to make me feel sick. We filed a police report anyway. The officer was kind and careful. He said the right words. Without a clear face, he couldn't promise anything beyond a report number and a suggestion to vary my routines. Carla left voicemails on Jonah's phone when she couldn't reach me. In one, she cried hard enough to make a stranger pity her. In the next, she turned cold and calculated listing laws she half understood and misquoting phrases like de facto custody. She said she'd see me in court, as if court were a stage, and she had already chosen her costume. Mark kept me updated from his new 1-bedroom. He'd moved out fast with Ava and Piper carrying boxes down the steps like thieves stealing their own things. "She's furious," he said, understatement, doing heavy lifting. "Paperwork's in." My lawyer said to document everything. He helped me make a folder. We printed screenshots. We saved voicemails to a thumb drive. We photographed the tires and the envelope and the missed calls. We wrote dates on the backs of photos like we were building a museum exhibit about why we would not be opening our door. I called my OB and explained the situation. They flagged my chart with a bright red privacy alert. They added a passcode to my file. They asked for a list of acceptable callers. They moved me to a back exit for appointments. I felt silly and grateful, at the same time silly for needing measures like that, grateful to be believed without defending myself. At night, Jonah checked the locks and I checked the windows. We turned on the porch light even when we were home. Our neighbors, a retired couple who collect wind chimes and stories, kept an eye out. Mr. Alvarez texted me once at 11:42 p.m. White sedan drove by slow. Took a photo. Again at 6:07 a.m. Same car, different driver. He added a thumbs up emoji that made me laugh through the nausea. We talked about moving. There was a house 30 minutes away with a little yard and creaky floors, and a detached garage where you could hear rain thrum like a drumline. The idea of packing while nauseous and bone-tired made me wilt. Still, safety beats convenience. Before I could spiral, Mark surprised us. "What if we find a place with a mother-in-law suite?" he suggested. "I'll rent it. You'll have a buffer and help on hand. I can be 2 doors away if she tries anything." The offer wasn't romantic. It was practical and protective and rooted in the fact that he knew exactly which nights were hardest. We started looking. Meanwhile, Carla adjusted tactics. She weaponized other people. Nani called voice threaded with worry and scolding. "She says you're keeping her grandbaby away out of spite," Nani murmured. "Maybe we could do a visit at my house. I'll watch every second." I took a breath, kept my tone even, and said, "No. Not now. Maybe not ever." The silence that followed carried years of tradition. Then, to my surprise, Nani said, small and tired, "I don't know how to sit between you and her anymore." We changed the subject to soup recipes. After we hung up, Mara texted me, "Proud of you. Don't let them guilt you into unsafe." I put off posting anything about the pregnancy. I wore loose sweaters. At work, I blamed crackers for the smell of coffee making me gag. I didn't put our hospital's name on a single form that wasn't mandatory. I knew Carla's pattern. She gathers pieces and stitches a map. I decided to be blank paper. At 16 weeks, the specialist ran the anatomy scan. The wand glided over my stomach. Jonah watched the screen like it was broadcasting the only show that mattered. "Everything looks good," the text said. I had been holding in another kind of breath for weeks. Hearing good didn't make me burst into tears on the table the way I expected. It made my muscles soften, as if I had been clenching against a punch that didn't land. We told Mark and my sisters the sex girl, and watched joy rearrange their faces. We set boundaries in the same breath. No social media, I said. No hints. No hearts over baby bump photos. They nodded. They know me. They know why. Eric built a crib that made our spare room look like a promise. Camilla sewed curtains with tiny sunflowers. Ava taught me how to keep a plant alive. Piper showed up on Saturday mornings to install baby-proofing like she was training for a heist. Carla found out anyway. I don't know if it was Nani, someone from church, or a neighbor in our old cul-de-sac who saw a package on our porch and did the math out loud. Within hours, the texts pinged again, then the calls, then an email to my work account with the subject line, "I forgive you." It read like a press release written by someone who believes that a grand gesture erases a decade. I put it in the folder. 2 days later, there was pounding on our front door while Jonah was at work. It wasn't a knock. It was a message. I looked through the peephole and saw Carla's face twisted in a mask I recognized from my childhood, the one that came out when a plan flipped on her. "I have a right to see my grandchild," she shouted, though the grandchild in question was still living under my ribs. I called Mark with my left thumb while dialing 911 with my right. He answered on the first ring. "I'm 2 minutes out," he said. He'd been on his way with groceries. He arrived before the police. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He told Carla evenly that if she didn't leave, he would make sure she did. She left. The officers came. We filed for a temporary restraining order the next morning. Papers stacked with dates, screenshots, report numbers, camera stills, and statements from Mark, my sisters, and the guard at the reception. The judge read quietly, asked 3 questions, and granted a temporary order on the spot. The hearing for a permanent order went on the calendar for 6 weeks later. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt like I'd been running with a full toolbox on my back, and someone finally took it away. My spine ached with the phantom weight. The order slowed Carla, but didn't change her story. She told anyone who would listen that I'd become cruel. She said Mark had brainwashed me. She said Jonah and his parents were controlling me. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been familiar. This is what abusers do when their audience shrinks. They pitch to a new room. Meanwhile, Mark's divorce plodded forward. Carla refused to sign anything. She made wild demands, then complained when judges did not award her treasure for making everyone miserable. Mark brought the papers he needed to my kitchen table. Camilla fed him lasagna, and Eric poured him a beer, and Jonah helped him translate legalese into plain sentences. I watched a tired man remember that he wasn't alone. The weeks between the temporary order and the hearing felt elastic. Time stretched on certain afternoons when the house was too quiet, and every creak sounded like a foot on the porch. Other days snapped shut so fast I barely tasted them. My belly grew. Strangers smiled at me in the grocery store and asked when I was due. I answered in numbers. I didn't tell them about the folder. The night before the hearing, I slept 3 broken hours. In one dream, I was back in the diner. In another, I was walking through a field of candles, and each one blew out when I reached it. When the alarm went off, Jonah handed me toast I couldn't swallow and water I forced down. Mark met us at the courthouse with a file box and a quiet presence that felt like a chair you know won't collapse when you sit on it. Carla arrived in a polished outfit, and the performance face I knew too well, soft contrite, the victim of other people's cruelty. She sat with her lawyer and whispered with the precision of someone who rehearsed in the mirror. I didn't look at her. I watched the judge. I listened to our attorney outline the dates. I spoke when asked, voice steady, because I'd practiced out loud alone in the car. The guard from the reception testified. The hospital security officer did too. Mark told the court what he'd witnessed and what he feared. The judge read the messages. He looked at the tire photos. He frowned at the notes about my job and the front porch pounding. He granted a 1-year order with conditions and said any violation will be taken seriously. We walked into the hallway, and I finally cried. Not because a piece of paper would fix everything, because a piece of paper said out loud on the record that what had happened was real and not my fault. After the hearing, life didn't become a montage of sunrise and lullabies. It became normal in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Tedious sweet, mildly uncomfortable. I peed a dozen times a night. I sent Jonah to the store for popsicles and pickles in the same trip. Camila taught me to sew the simplest cloths for burping, because she insists you can never have too many. Ava came over to arrange plants near the nursery window because babies like green. Piper put a tiny basketball in the crib and declared the baby an athlete as a joke. Eric fixed the squeak in the back door. Carla tried another number. It didn't ring through. She sent a letter through a cousin. We returned it unopened. She used a neighbor to ask for just one photo. We declined. She filed something in family court that didn't go anywhere because restraining orders matter. For once, the boundary held. Late one afternoon, Mark knocked and stepped into our kitchen, carrying a cardboard box. "For your folder," he said. Inside were old photos I'd never seen me at 5 with marker on my cheek. Ava in a tutu and my oversized sweater. Piper asleep on the couch with a book open on her stomach. Tucked between the snapshots was a receipt from the dental office dated the day Carla lost her job, and a printout of a calendar with a doctor's note scrawled across it. "Keep these," he said. "Not because you'll need them in court, because you need a full story when your girl asks." Jonah wrapped an arm around my shoulders. The baby hiccuped like distant drums. I pressed my palm to the place she kicked. For the first time in weeks, the future didn't feel like an argument. It felt like a long road with mile markers we could choose together. The last stretch of pregnancy taught me a new kind of time. Days moved like honey, nights clicked like a metronome. I nested in small ways. I washed tiny onesies that looked like jokes until I held them up to my belly and understood scale. Jonah built a bassinet in the living room and measured the doorway 3 times so it could roll through without hitting the trim. Mark installed motion lights along the side yard and replaced the screws in our strike plates with longer ones because leverage matters. Ava brought over a pothos cutting and said plants like hearing stories. Piper tested every outlet cover like she was trying to break into a museum. Fear lived beside joy and did not kill it. I could feel both at once. I kept the folder in the drawer near the front door next to stamps and a roll of blue painter's tape. Every time I stuck a new page in, I made tea. Rituals help your hands remember what your mouth can't say. Mark found a small duplex 15 minutes away with a converted garage out back. The space had its own entrance, a little kitchenette, and a window that caught the pink of sunsets. He moved in with 2 suitcases, a toolbox, and a chair that had seen 3 jobs and 100 naps. We traded keys. He put ours on a carabiner and said, "Text me a code word if you ever want me to show up without questions." I chose sunflower because Camilla had sewn them into the nursery curtains. Jonah and I met with the hospital's privacy officer. We set an alias on my chart. We listed 3 names allowed to receive updates. We asked staff not to announce my room number. They nodded like this wasn't their first time protecting someone from family. We created 2 routes to the hospital and a decoy bag with old pajamas and a paperback in case we had to drop something and move fast. It felt dramatic. It felt reasonable. Carla drifted close in sideways ways. A distant cousin sent a message with a photo of a crocheted baby hat and a note that read, "Your mom picked the yarn." I thanked her and didn't answer any questions. Nani called twice and hung up when I answered, then called again to tell me she loved me in a voice like tissue paper. I believed her and still kept my plans to myself. Mark's divorce ground forward. His lawyer used words like discovery and mediation, while Carla used words like betrayal and robbery. She refused to sign 3 different offers. Judges don't award peace, they enforce process. He stuck with it. He made copies. He showed up. He let Jonah and Eric carry his file box up our steps when the edges softened the cardboard. At 36 weeks, I woke up to a hard, unmistakable pain that rolled through me like a wave. Not a crash, a deep pull. It passed and I lay still, hand on my belly, counting my breath the way I used to count tiles in the hallway at Carla's house. 10 minutes later, another. I nudged Jonah. He sat up fully awake on the first syllable of my name. We timed. We moved. We followed the plan we'd rehearsed until it felt like muscle memory. Call Mark. Text Camilla. Grab the real bag and the folder. Leave the porch light on. Mark was on our steps when we opened the door, dressed keys in hand, the car idling at the curb. He didn't say much. He put the bag in the trunk and checked the street with the quiet thoroughness of someone who has learned the cost of missed details. We took the back route, the one that passed the bakery, where we didn't buy a cake. I watched the empty display cases glow in the dark and felt a small thread of satisfaction that we'd found another way to celebrate. The hospital was ready. They used my alias. They strapped the monitors on and handed me ice chips like they were precious gems. The nurse, a woman with silver hair pulled into a clean ponytail, looked me in the eye and said, "We have you." I believed her more than I believed breathing apps. Labor opened doors inside me I didn't know I had. Jonah murmured counts. Mark sat in a chair and studied the ceiling tiles like they were a puzzle that needed solving. In a calm voice, he asked the nurse where security stationed their overnight detail. She told him. He relaxed 1 degree. Hours lengthened and shortened. Each contraction felt like a wave that had my name written in its foam. I rode them. I cursed once, then apologized to no one. When push came, literal title time disappeared. Then a cry filled the room, high and outraged and brand new. The nurse laughed. Jonah made a sound I've never heard from him, something halfway between a laugh and a sob. They placed a warm, squirming person on my chest. We named her Maya Ruth. Maya for the softness and strength in one syllable, Ruth for the woman who taught me to keep feeding people even when your heart is tired. I kissed her damp hair and whispered that she was safe. I also whispered that I would mess up and try again every day. We stayed 2 days. No visitors except Jonah's parents and Mark, one at a time in quiet windows when the hallways were still. Camilla cried and pressed her forehead to mine. Eric hovered near the sink and washed his hands like the soap label held directions for how to become a grandfather. Mark held Maya with hands that looked too big for the job until she sighed and sunk into his chest as if she recognized the man who had changed 100 light bulbs in my life without asking for credit. We drove home in the slow lane. The porch light was still on. The neighbors had chalked "Welcome Maya" on the sidewalk in big, wobbly letters after dawn, and left a casserole that said they understood what new parents actually need. Ava had tucked a note under the doormat call, "Before you need anything." I live 10 minutes away, Piper had added. I can learn anything from YouTube. Try me. The first week felt like stepping into a new world with familiar gravity. The clock broke into 3-hour loops. The living room became a camp with burp cloths stacked like snow. Jonah and I learned the choreography of passing a baby between us without waking her. Camila snuck in with soup and exited before I could form a full sentence. Mark texted Sunflower 3 times, and each time I said yes, even when the only help I needed was someone to hold Maya, so I could shower with the door open and cry for 6 minutes for reasons that weren't really reasons. The restraining order held. Carla tried a workaround worth noting. She got her sister to drop a gift bag on our porch with a card that read, "To my blood." The handwriting looked like hers. The bag held a silver frame and a rattling sound I didn't trust. Mark used a pen to lift the tissue. Inside were 4 tiny shoes and a folded printout of a blog post arguing for grandparent rights. I put the shoes in a donation box and the paper in the folder. We did not reply. We did not post. Day 8 at 9:12 a.m. Someone stood across the street and photographed our house. Mr. Alvarez saw from his front window, took a picture of the photographer, and texted it to me. Hood up, sunglasses. The stance shouted Carla. The image quality couldn't prove her identity. The pattern could. We added the screenshot to the folder. I called our case officer. He said document. Call if she approaches. You did the right thing. On day 12, I heard pounding on the door while Jonah was at the pharmacy picking up infant Tylenol. Not a knock, not a delivery, a punch. I checked the camera feed on my phone. A figure stood on the porch face, hidden by the hood, leaning into the door like she could push through if she believed hard enough. I recorded. I texted Sunflower to Mark. I dialed 911. Stay on the line, the dispatcher said. Officers are en route. She stayed with me while Maya slept on my chest. I whispered my answers. I felt my pulse in my tongue. Mark's footsteps hit the porch before the police. He didn't open the door. He spoke through it, voice carrying level. You're violating a court order, he said. Leave now. The The figure hesitated and then bolted shoes loud on the steps. The neighbor's camera caught her running to a car idling 2 houses down. The plate was a partial, the make and model were clear. The officers arrived and took statements. They pulled footage from 3 homes. They recognized the posture and the car. It was enough. That afternoon, the detective called, "We're issuing a warrant for violation of the restraining order." There is a particular relief in knowing consequences don't depend on you anymore. It's not joy. It's not vindication. It's a door closing somewhere out of sight. 2 days later, they picked her up a few miles from our old cul-de-sac. She was alone in a sedan registered to a cousin. In the trunk, they found a shoebox filled with random baby items still in their packaging and a notebook with addresses and dates. Our house was listed 3 times with times of day scribbled beside it. The detective told me, because he knew the knowledge would steady me and agitate me in equal measure. "She'll be arraigned tomorrow," he said. "You don't have to appear for this one." The court extended the order. They added conditions: no third-party gifts, no indirect contact through any relative mandatory counseling as a term of probation. She pleaded not guilty, then guilty. Her lawyer mentioned addiction and heartbreak. The judge mentioned safety and pattern. Probation came with a leash break-it, and the next stop is jail. Mark's divorce finalized the same week. He sat at our kitchen table with a paper that said he was no longer responsible for the person who had used his kindness as furniture. He didn't cheer. He looked tired and lighter, like someone set down a bag he'd been carrying so long it had grown into his shoulders. I hugged him. Jonah clapped his back. Camilla baked a cake the size of a small tire and wrote "Onward" in thick blue icing. Nani came by alone on a Tuesday with a jar of soup and a look I recognized from mirrors. She has always been torn between loyalty and truth. She sat on the edge of the couch and held Maya like she weighed a feather. "I told her to stop," Nani said without names. "I told her I wouldn't pass along messages anymore." She looked at me. I should have told her years ago. I didn't give a speech. I said thank you. We ate soup at the counter and talked about the way babies smell like warm milk and clean sleep. Tasha visited that weekend with Micah, who wore a big cousin shirt despite not fully understanding what the title entails. She set down a diaper caddy loaded like a go bag and laughed when Maya sneezed herself awake. We stood on the porch later, looking at the street where wind pushed leaves into small piles. "You're doing it," she said. "You're building a life that doesn't orbit her." I squeezed her hand. "So are you." The week settled. Nights rose and fell. I learned to nap with one eye open, and then slowly with both closed for 20-minute stretches that felt like riches. Mark texted Sunflower less because he was already here when we needed him. Ava turned the pothos so it would lean toward the light. Piper took me on my first walk around the block with Maya strapped to my chest, and we came home feeling like we'd been to the ocean. One morning, an official-looking envelope arrived addressed to me. I recognized the county seal. For a second, my stomach dropped. I opened it. Inside was a notice confirming the restraining order renewal hearing date for next year set by the court automatically. I filed it. I felt my breath lengthen. That date was far away and also close enough to plan for. Safety is not a feeling, it's a practice. Around that time, my OB's office called to schedule my 6-week check. The nurse asked if I had any concerns. I said sleep, of course. I said stitches, healing the strange way my brain kept playing ghost sounds of crying when the house was silent. I did not say the thing that woke me most nights, a picture of Maya at 16. At the door asking questions about her grandmother, I would have answers. I would have the folder. I would have the right to say no contact and the obligation to say, here is why. We baptized our living room in small ceremonies. The first real smile. The time she discovered her hands. The day she tracked Jonah across the room like he was the sun. Eric filmed everything on a phone that always needed more storage. Camilla taught me the trick of folding a receiving blanket into a swaddle that looks like it won't hold and always does. Mark took Maya fishing by holding her and pointing at a pond while I sat on a bench and ate a sandwich with both hands for the first time in weeks. He didn't get a line wet. That wasn't the point. Carla faded from the daily soundtrack. She was still out there somewhere, telling stories to anyone who would listen, but the volume was lower because the law had a hand on the knob. She started a new myth within the family grapevine that I had stolen the baby from her. I didn't rebut it. I no longer manage other people's versions. Mara did, though. She called one of the cousins and said, "Enough." She sent me a screenshot of the text where she drew a line like a fence. The only flinch came on a Tuesday when a delivery driver mixed up address and knocked with a box I didn't recognize. My body flooded with heat and old adrenaline. He apologized, backed away, and I laughed at how fast fear pours into grooves carved years ago. I held Maya and told her the truth. Sometimes your brain thinks ghosts are real because your body remembers. You can tell it new stories. It takes time. Spring leaned in, Jonah turned 30, and we put Maya in a party hat that she tried to eat. Mark picked up a shift helping a friend rebuild a deck and came home with his forearms covered in sawdust and peace. Ava taught me to propagate the pothos, and we made tiny jars of cuttings for the people who had carried us. Piper declared herself head of naptime security and wore sunglasses inside as a bit. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. Not pounding, not fists, the regular chime. Jonah checked the camera. A process server stood on the porch with a neutral face and a folder. He asked for me by name. My shoulders tightened. He handed me a stamped copy of the court's notice. The restraining order had been converted from 1 year to 3 based on documented violation and ongoing risk. Our attorney had requested the modification quietly, and the judge had granted it. I felt the oddest sensation, like finding a $100 bill in a winter coat you stored away during a storm. Relief and surprise and a flicker of disbelief. We baked brownies that night and ate them with our fingers. The next morning, I took Maya on a walk at the hour when the neighborhood smells like toast and wet grass. A robin hopped across the sidewalk, brave and ordinary. I thought about the diner, the bakery, the doorway at the reception, the ultrasound heartbeat, the porch pounding, the judge's gavel, the 3-year line drawn in ink. All those moments whittled me into a person I recognize as mine. I once believed ending contact with a parent meant tearing out part of yourself. What I know now is that you cut rot to save wood. You remove what eats the structure so the structure can hold weight. You can grieve and not invite the source of harm back into your home. Both can sit in the same room. They do not cancel each other. You want to know if this is the end of the drama. It isn't a movie. It's a life. There will be another letter someday. Another cousin who thinks they're a bridge. Another date circled on a calendar. But there will also be first steps on a rug that needs vacuuming and a toddler laugh that knocks dust out of corners. There will be birthdays where the only scene is cake icing on cheeks. There will be quiet. Part 5 will hold one of those quiets and the small storm that follows it. For now, here is what I'm sure of. I will protect my daughter from what hurt me. I will not make my fear her teacher. I will teach her the names of her people. Anchor, validator, revealer. The ants who show up with food and jokes. And I will tell her that love is not loud, it is consistent. When she asks where my mother is, I will tell the truth without letting the past own the room. Would you have filed the papers too? Peace didn't leave with fanfare. It thinned like mist that looks solid until you step into it. We had a rhythm, and then the rhythm skipped. By then, Maya could track light as it crossed the wall. She'd turn her head and follow the square of sun from one corner of the room to the other, like it was a slow parade. I talked to her about everything, the sound the kettle makes, why laundry never ends, how some days the world smells like rain, even when the sky is clear. Jonah went back to work 2 days a week and took the late shift so he could do noon feedings and bath time. Mark kept to the garage flat fixing neighbors' screens and refusing payment by accepting pie. The 3-year order bought us quiet. Phones stopped blinking with unknown numbers. The mailbox held only bills and pizza menus. I caught my breath 1 week at a time. Then, on a Tuesday morning that smelled like toast, the knock came that wasn't the door. It was the tone, first cheerful but official. I opened to a woman with a badge clipped to her sweater and a tote bag that bumped her knee when she shifted her weight. She introduced herself as a child welfare investigator. She said there'd been a report. I have learned to separate panic from movement. "Come in," I said, and I texted Sunflower before she stepped over the threshold. Her eyes did the scan floor's counters baby me? Maya yawned. The investigator smiled at the yawn. She couldn't help it, and then pulled a notepad. "This won't take long," she said. We just need to ask a few questions and look around. She asked about feeding sleep pediatric visits. I answered and pulled up the app with vaccination dates and weights, and the photo of Maya in a diaper wearing the tiniest ankle band from the hospital. The investigator glanced at the bassinet, the stack of burp cloths, the white noise machine humming like distant rain. "Do you have support?" she asked. The door opened on cue. Mark stood there, breath even. He nodded at the badge, introduced himself, and set a binder on the table. Labels on the spine, pediatric records, restraining order, police reports. He didn't push it toward her, just placed it where she could see it if she wanted. She looked. People always look. "May I?" He nodded. She flipped eyes, slowing at the page with the court stamp and the paragraph that begins with the words "sufficient cause." "Do you know who made the report?" I asked. She shook her head. "Reports can be anonymous," she said. "We don't disclose sources." Her tone said she knew I knew. Her eyes said she'd seen this pattern a dozen times in a dozen living rooms that smelled like toast. She toured gently. She peeked in the fridge, checked water temperature at the sink, looked at the crib setup and the outlet covers Piper had installed with comic seriousness. She asked if she could hold Maya for a second to listen to breathing. Maya obligingly hiccuped. The investigator grinned again, even though she was trying not to. "She sounds perfect," she said, handing her back. "This looks good. If anything else comes up, you'll hear from me. Otherwise, I'll close this out." "Thank you," I said. 2 syllables, clean. When she left, my hands shook so hard I had to sit on them. Mark set a glass of water beside me and didn't pretend I wasn't vibrating. "Jonah texted you okay?" I sent back a photo of my knees. It made him laugh. Laughter loosens nerves faster than advice. I called our attorney anyway. He told me what I already knew. Document breathed document. He offered to send a letter laying out the order and the recent violation to the agency so the next knock, if there was one, arrived with a printout attached. I said yes, because paper makes some people behave. 2 hours later, Aunt Mara called. She tried to recruit me, she said without hello. "Your mother." She called saying, "Concerned relatives, we're going to fix what the court broke." I could hear dishes clink in her sink. She was angry cleaning. I told her if she touched the edges of your life again, I'd hand-deliver the folder to every judge in the county. She paused. I think she asked Julian to make the call. Julian is the cousin who uses just asking questions like a crowbar. He's useful to people who want trouble without fingerprints. He won't. I said, knowing he might. He might, she countered, knowing he would. He's still chasing the high of being helpful without the work of being helpful. The investigator closed the case by the end of the week. I filed the letter beside the court stamp and the photos of the tires. I added a tab labeled CPS, not because I wanted the acronym in my house, but because order is how I make fear smaller. The next quiet held. Maya found her hands. She stared at them like they were fireworks. Jonah cried a little the first time she grabbed his finger with intention. He kissed her fist like it had secrets. Camilla brought over a sling and taught me the knot her hands, moving fast and sure. Eric installed a second camera angle on the porch because he cannot sit still when there is a project within 50 feet. Piper filmed me reading board books and added captions that made me sound funnier than I am. Ava traded my dying basil plant for a hardy herb that wanted to live. Then my phone lit with Nani's name 3 calls in a row. I answered on the 4th because 4 is the number that means hospital in our family. "I fell," she said, voice confetti thin. "I'm at St. Luke's. Don't tell." She stopped because someone was entering her room, or because the old habit of not naming my mother out loud came back like a reflex. They say it's a small stroke. I feel silly. I don't think it's silly. I just feel it. I told her we were coming. I told her we'd coordinate so no one violated court orders in a hallway. I told her I loved her and meant it, even while anger scuffed the corners of my love. Enabling is love that picked the wrong map. Mark drove. Jonah sat in the back with Maya humming. In the hospital parking lot, I texted the privacy officer we'd met before. She met us in the lobby with a badge that opens doors. "We flagged the chart," she said. "No overlapping visitation. Security posted at the unit desk. Text me when you leave." We walked into Nani's room to see her propped up with one side of her mouth a fraction slower than the other. She looked like herself and like a photograph of herself taken through glass. "You look good," I said, meaning alive, meaning reachable. She rolled her eyes in the old way and then held out her hand for Maya. Watching a 90-year-old hold a 3-month-old is like watching two ends of the same rope touch. I kept my visit short because I remember what it feels like to be the patient everyone thinks needs company. We talked about soup and quilts and which nurse had the kindest hands. When I stood to go, the privacy officer appeared in the doorway, palm up, subtle as rain. "Time," she said quietly. As we stepped into the hall, I saw Carla at the far end, walking toward the unit desk with her chin up and a story already written on her face. She wore a cardigan that made her look like she knew how to apologize. She didn't see us. She wouldn't have liked what she saw if she had me leaving on time, not running, not hiding, not pleading. The officer intercepted her. I heard the words, even from where I stood, "Order probation, contact violation," and watched Carla tilt her head in a performance of confusion so polished it should have won awards. She turned away with theatrical injury. The quiet that followed wasn't triumph. It was maintenance. Boundaries are chores you do every day, not a fence you build once. We brought Nani home 2 days later. She insisted on sleeping in her own bed. Mara moved in for a week, banging pots like a metronome to keep the house awake. I brought soup in jars and a list of physical therapy exercises printed in a font big enough to read without glasses. Nani rolled her eyes at the list, then did every exercise twice. At Nani's kitchen table, Mara told me the part I didn't know. "Your mom's been telling people she's sober now," she said. 30 days. She's shopping for a miracle. If she can't get one, she'll borrow yours." Mara sipped coffee and didn't apologize for mixing truth with worry. She asked Julian to post a picture of Maya on his page and tag her so she can pray over it. Mara looked at me flatly. I told him if he did, he better pray for his Wi-Fi because I'd burn it down. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because sometimes the only way not to cry is to lean into someone else's gallows humor. "Thanks," I said. "Keep him off the bridge." Jonah picked up an extra shift the next weekend. I did the evening alone with Maya, and the house felt too big by half. Mark texted Sunflower, and I said no because I wanted to practice being okay without always calling for backup. Half an hour later, he texted anyway, porch lights out, replacing it. He moved like a ghost on the camera feed, a helpful one with a ladder. My body unwound 2 inches. The next small storm came through the mail. A lawyer in another county filed a petition claiming grandparent visitation in the child's best interest. Carla's name was at the top, but the address listed wasn't hers. She had routed it through that cousin, the one who thinks oblique is holy. Our attorney laughed once in a way that held no joy, and then drafted a response that was a brick made of case law. Restraining order, documented harassment, prior contempt. The phrases stacked like cinder blocks. The court dismissed it at the first hearing. Not in the child's interest is sterile when you read it in emotion. It feels like clean air when a judge says it out loud. Carla's lawyer tried to make new law by arguing biology as destiny. The judge pointed at the phrase harm and waited. The silence after a bad argument dies is the nicest sound in a courtroom. I thought the dismissal would soften something in me. It didn't. It removed a stone from a pack I'd forgotten I was still carrying. That's not softness, that's physics. Maya rolled over the next morning. She startled herself, then looked proud. Jonah filmed with terrible angles because awe makes directors clumsy. We sent the video to Mark, to Camilla, and Eric, to Ava, and Piper, and to Mara. The replies came fast and loud. Nani sent a text with 3 exclamation marks, a number she reserves for holiday disasters and new babies. I sat on the rug and cried over a human who had discovered her side. Mark started seeing someone. He waited 3 weeks before telling me because he didn't want me to feel as if he were asking permission. Her name is Grace. He met her at the hardware store when she asked which wall anchors to buy for a floating shelf, and he answered with a 4-minute tutorial. She rolled her eyes and said, "So, these ones," he told me, grinning at his own expense. They took it slow. He brought her by for coffee on a Sunday when Jonah was home, and the house had that warm smell of waffles and soap. Grace listened more than she talked. She didn't flinch when the conversation bumped into courts and orders and cousins who set fires with rumors. When she left, Jonah whispered, solid, and I understood why he and Mark get along. Nani had a setback and went back for 2 nights. We rotated visits again, like planes circling a small airport. Carla tried to sneak in during Mara's slot and got walked out by the same security lead who had walked her out of my event months ago. She claimed persecution. She claimed confusion. She claimed Jesus. The staff claimed policy. The nurse with kind hands told Nani that everyone has family and not all of them are good at it. Nani told me she has started praying for me to be stubborn. I said those are prayers I can use. On a Wednesday afternoon, the detective called with the word we've all learned to respect update. Carla had violated probation by showing up at a cousin's house where she knew I'd be dropping off a box of baby clothes for a neighbor. A Ring camera got her full face, and the audio captured her saying my name with a sneer that made me feel 14 for exactly 1 second before I remembered I was holding a baby and a court order. They picked her up again. The sentence was brief, but not nothing. 10 days served, extended probation, mandatory group sessions she can skip. Only if she likes jail more than chairs and coffee in church basements. The law is not a hug. It's a wall. I am grateful for walls that don't move. During all this, Maya learned to laugh. It started as a hiccup with a smile attached, and then became a sound that knocked dust off a shelf in my chest. I didn't know my heart had a second room until that laugh opened a door. Piper recorded one of the laughs and turned it into a ringtone for me. The first time it went off in the grocery store, 3 strangers smiled at the shelf of pasta with me. On a slow Saturday, I took Maya to the park and sat on the bench where Jonah had proposed on a Tuesday because he wanted ordinary to be holy. A father taught a kid to ride a bike on the loop path, right foot pushing, left foot wobbling. Both voices bright. I breathed. I watched the shade crawl. I looked for the white sedan without thinking about it, and then laughed at myself for glancing at street corners like they were haunted. When we got home, an envelope waited on the mat with my name written in Nani's hand. Inside was a letter and a photo. The photo was my mother at 18 holding a cake with too many candles for a joke. She looked like a person who hadn't learned yet how to turn hunger into weapons. The letter held the part of the story that belonged to Nani to tell the first prescription after Carla broke her wrist as a teen, the boyfriend who introduced her to sharper things. The day Nani made a choice to look away because the truth made her feel like a failure. "I'm sorry I handed you silence and called it peace," she wrote. "I'm choosing truth now, even if it makes the room colder." I put the photo in the folder and the letter in the drawer where I keep Maya's hospital bracelet and the cap they gave us when we left the ward. Context is not a pass, but it is a map you can study so you don't walk the same wrong road twice. The next small storm was so petty it made me laugh in the middle of being angry. An old friend from high school messaged me out of nowhere to invite us to her kid's birthday, and then in the second sentence, asked if Grandma Carla could stop by to meet the baby because everyone deserves second chances. I stared at the screen and felt the familiar fatigue, then remembered I didn't owe an essay. I wrote no. We have a court order and pressed send. She replied with a paragraph about grace. I didn't answer. I made pasta. I fed Maya mashed avocado. I let the lesson be some people love drama dressed as mercy. Tell them you're busy. In late spring, Jonah's parents hosted a backyard dinner. String lights, paper plates, corn on the cob with butter that got all over everyone's hands. Mark brought Grace. She fit not because she tried to, but because she didn't. Camilla asked her about the anchor story, and they laughed. Eric told the baby with solemn authority that she was ready for grilled peaches when her teeth came in. Ava and Piper taught Maya to splash in a tub that was really a big salad bowl no one wanted back. I looked around the table and tried to memorize the shape of each head in small light. We were halfway through dessert when Mr. Alvarez texted car circling again. Not white, dark blue, 2 passes. It wasn't panic this time, it was maintenance. Jonah and Eric walked to the curb like men talking about lawn care. Mark checked the side gate. I turned the camera view on and zoomed until the pixels gave up. The car passed once more. Didn't slow. Didn't stop. Drove on. Jonah shrugged when he came back and took a peach slice with 2 fingers. The world had not ended. We finished dessert. I thought the chapter might close there, with small storms that we outlasted through habit and humor. Life being life gave me one more turn before it let me rest. A letter arrived from the court scheduling a review of the restraining order at the 1-year mark, a standard check. My stomach dropped and then recovered. Our attorney would attend. I didn't have to. He said it was administrative. Still, the date circled itself red in my mind. The week before, Carla mailed a narrative to the judge, a stack of papers stamped "Received" that read like a memoir from a different planet. It used words like healed and grandmother and forgiveness, as if they had no histories. The last page asked for the order to be lifted so she could hold the baby and correct misunderstandings. Our response was boring on purpose. Dates facts, call logs the probation terms, the prior violation. Jonah called it unsexy paperwork, which made me laugh at how grief and love and court all live in the same file folder. The judge read both and extended without comment. The stamp landed with a thud I felt through the table. I carried Maya to the window and showed her the maple tree out front. A breeze tagged it, and it waved like it was agreeing with us. I told her the names of the people who hold us: Jonah the anchor, Mark the validator, Mara the revealer, Camila and Eric the steady weather, Ava and Piper the daily joy, Mr. and Mrs. Alvarez the watchful neighbors, Grace the new branch, Nani the complicated truth, and me the mother who will protect, without making fear her daughter's first language. I promised myself I'd have a simple way to tell Maya how we got here, not the court filings or the camera screenshots, a story she can carry without it crushing her. When she asks, and kids always ask, I want a version that fits in a single breath. We made a family on purpose. We kept the kind people close. We put a safe wall between us and the hurt. That's how we stayed whole. That's the short version. Here's the rest, the last turns that made it true. Maya turned 1 on a Sunday when the air smelled like cut grass. She smashed a cupcake with 2 determined hands while everyone cheered like she'd won a prize. Jonah held the camera at a bad angle because awe makes hands clumsy. Camila wiped frosting from Maya's eyelashes with a gentle thumb. Eric grilled peaches and declared them officially toddler approved. Ava tucked a pothos cutting into damp soil in a jar labeled Maya's first plant. Piper wore her head of naptime security sunglasses and pretended the living room was a checkpoint. Mark came with Grace and a toolbox just in case. He didn't need it. He brings it anyway. That's who he is. After cake, he pulled me aside. I booked the cabin, he said, smiling like a man who finally lets himself plan ahead. 3 days by the lake in June. You, Jonah, and Maya. I'll stay in the garage flat and feed the cat. Consider it a trade for all the Sundays you've fed me. That cabin invitation sat in my chest like sunlight. The year before, every plan felt conditional if nothing happens. Now we were claiming dates on a calendar without apology. The order on Carla stayed steady. The phone didn't buzz with unknown numbers. The porch didn't shake under fists. The folder by the front door got a new tab once in a while, letters from the court and update from the detective. But the pages came slower, like a faucet turned down. Then the timeline jumped without asking. That's what toddlers do. One day you're patting a baby to sleep. The next, she's announcing no with a laugh that lives in your ribs. Maya learned words the way other kids collect rocks. Light, dog, more. She learned sunflower because Mark and I used the code without thinking, and she decided it was funny. She started using it as a joke when she wanted him to appear. The first time she yelled sunflower, and he answered from the gate, I cried in the kitchen over a sink full of spoons. Grace eased into our circle with quiet competence. She doesn't fill air with stories about herself. She shows up with soup, asks where you keep the good scissors, and fixes the wobbly chair while you're still talking about it. She and Mark took long walks that ended in his garage flat with 2 mugs and a checklist. When he told me he'd asked her to move in, he looked like a man who had finally stepped into a room with the right temperature. Mara kept her post as the truth teller. Nani found a new rhythm after the stroke, slower steps, stubborn spirit. She started mailing me recipes with notes like, less salt, more lemon. Trust me. I'd text her photos of Maya with a spoon and she'd reply, that baby eats like a mare. This was our ordinary string lights in the yard. A baby gate that always needed adjusting, neighbors who waved a folder that mostly stayed shut. Nani died in her sleep in late autumn. The call came at 5:42 a.m. the hour when the house is quiet, but not completely dark. I sat at the edge of the bed while Jonah laced his fingers through mine and let me cry without steering it. Grief arrived gentle, no drama, just a long release. 90 years is a good stretch, but love doesn't understand math. We met at Nani's church the following Saturday. The room smelled like old hymnals and coffee. The usher who remembered me from the hospital privacy office nodded when I walked in and gestured toward the aisle where family would sit. Mara had planned everything with military kindness. A photo board leaned against the front pew, Nani pouring soup. Nani on a porch swing. Nani in a ridiculous sun hat holding a watermelon. Before we left home, our attorney had emailed the church a copy of the order with a plain note individual named herein is barred from contact with petitioner and the child. Security requested at entrances. I hated having to think that way on a day like this. I did it anyway. Boundaries are chores. You keep doing them when you're tired. Maya wore a navy dress with yellow flowers. It felt right to bring a tiny sunflower into a room that taught me the word mercy. Mark took one side of me, Jonah took the other. Grace packed tissues and did the head count at the door like a bouncer. Camilla sat behind us and said the psalm under her breath in Spanish. Eric held Maya and made a soft clicking sound she loves. Halfway through the service during the hymn, Nani liked because the verses are mostly verbs do love keep. I saw movement at the side entrance. A woman in a beige coat paused at the threshold like a person testing water. Sunglasses came off. Cardigan in the safe color, face composed. Carla. Her eyes picked the pew where I sat the way a hawk picks a fence post. One of the deacons stepped into her line of sight and shook his head. She lifted her hands, performed confusion. The deacon didn't move. She slid to the back pew and sat with her hands clasped as if prayer were a photograph. I stared at the hymn book and sang the next line because a promise is a promise. I won't let her steal any more of my minutes. After the service, Mara took my elbow. We'll go to the graveside in the first car. Security patterned the rest. Nobody needs a scene. She didn't whisper. She didn't apologize for logistics at a funeral. That's love too, making a map so people don't get lost in the part where it hurts. At the graveside, the pastor said the words people say when they're standing in wind next to a hole. Dust, return peace. The ground smelled like leaves and water. I dropped a single sunflower on the casket, because stubbornness can be a blessing if you point it in the right direction. Maya reached for the petals, then patted my cheek like she understood the assignment. Carla stayed away from the family plot. She watched from the lot, under a tree, small and distant, held back by more than a paper. When we got home, there was no envelope on the mat, no message in a cousin's handwriting. That absence felt like a quilt stitched heavy warm. Grief cleared space for something else, a decision about the future that didn't come from fear. 2 weeks after the funeral, a padded envelope arrived with no return address and careful block letters. Inside was a certificate from a 30-day rehab program with Carla's name printed in a font that tried too hard to be solemn, plus a typed letter. The letter started with the words, "I'm sober." Then it became the thing she always writes, "I was in pain. Everyone abandoned me. You owe me a path back through your child." It asked for a meeting supervised if I insisted for the sake of healing. It did not include the word sorry in the way that matters the kind where you name the harm and leave out every excuse. I took the letter to Mara first. She skimmed, snorted once, and slid it back. "Pick your weather," she said. "She'll call whatever you choose a storm. Make it rain where you grow things." Then I brought it to Mark. He read slowly and looked at the ceiling like the right sentence might be printed there. 30 days is a start, he said. It's not a life. He took a breath. If you want to write back, I'll help you draw the line straight. That night, after Maya fell asleep with one fist on her cheek, I wrote a letter. I never thought I'd write. Not an invitation, not a door, not a dare. A boundary in complete sentences. Carla, I received your letter and the certificate. 30 days is a beginning. Maya is not part of your beginning. If you are serious about recovery, show it to the people you harmed directly. Aunt Mara, the cousins you used. The neighbors you scared, the employers you lied to. Pay what you owe where you can, and stop asking the people you hurt to fix the hole you dug. I will not arrange contact now or in the foreseeable future. I will not bring my daughter to be your proof of change. When Maya is grown, she can make her own choices. If you ever violate the order again, I will involve the court without warning or guilt. Do the work because you want a different life, not because you want access to mine. Nora, no flourish, no love, no hope. Just the truth I can live with. I mailed it certified, so she'd have to sign. A week later, the little green card came back with her name scribbled in the blank. I put the card in the folder. Then I took the rehab certificate and slid it into a different envelope addressed to myself, sealed it, and wrote on the outside in black marker for Maya. At 18, if she asks. I put that envelope in the locked box where I keep the things that are hers to decide about one day. Not now. We took Mark up on the cabin. The lake didn't care about our history. It just lay there, making light into ripples the way lakes do. We rented a rowboat with a dent in the side. Jonah rowed while Maya clapped and yelled splash at every oar. I lay back and watched the tops of pine trees move like slow dancers. The second night, rain came in with a steady rhythm that made the cabin roof sound like a soft drum. We sat at the little table and made a list of things we want to give our daughter that we didn't have in steady supply: calm mornings, honest explanations, the right to say no, jokes that don't punish, apologies that stick, people who show up on time, doors that shut and stay shut. On the third day, we packed the car and didn't feel the old urge to check the mirror every mile. I didn't realize how much time that habit had stolen until it wasn't the default. Back home, ordinary got deeper. Maya discovered puddles. Piper introduced her to the concept of splash day, which is just what it sounds like. Camilla taught her to tear lettuce and call it cooking. Eric announced that a toddler wrench set is a thing and brought one over so Maya could help Mark with a shelf in the laundry room. Ava started a little garden along the fence. We planted sunflowers because we are not subtle. Grace moved in with Mark officially. They put a calendar on the fridge with dinners penciled in and a list titled Fix Later that included 3 things Mark immediately fixed. Grace hangs her coat on the second hook from the left. Watching 2 grown-ups make room for each other without drama gave me a quiet thrill. Proof that love can be logistics without being boring. Mara never one to let a story pretend it's over when it isn't called one night to tell me Julian had finally blocked Carla on everything. He said he's tired of being the ladder she climbs when she wants to jump a fence. I laughed. Then I said the only thing that felt right. Good. We let ourselves plan farther out. Jonah and I circled a weekend in October for a short trip to the coast and asked Camila and Eric to stay at our place. Mark offered, but I told him to take Grace away for a day instead. He smiled like a man who'd been given the right assignment. 5. The last attempt and the answer that held. The last attempt came on a Thursday with the weather doing that undecided thing between sun and drizzle. A woman from Carla's latest church showed up at the edge of our lawn with a bundt cake and a speech about forgiveness written on her face. She didn't step onto the porch. She stood on the sidewalk as if that made it different. "We just want to help your mother be part of your life again," she said. "She's really trying." I didn't invite her closer. I didn't argue theology on the grass. "Please don't come here again," I said even and clear. "This is a boundary, not a debate." She opened her mouth to say the verse I knew she had memorized for this moment. I added, "We have a court order. I will call the police if anyone Carla sends keeps showing up." She left with the cake. I watched her go and felt nothing but the relief of an uncluttered step. An hour later, Carla texted from a new number. "Why are you so cruel, Block?" 2 hours after that, she tried emailing our joint account with a subject line that read, "Final olive branch. Delete." I forwarded both to our attorney and the case officer. Document, breathe, document. I didn't write back. Silence is an answer that takes practice. The next day, the detective called. We spoke with her pastor, he said. We made the terms clear. He apologized. I said thank you and meant it. People who correct themselves out loud are a gift. It didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like vacuuming. Necessary, not glamorous part of keeping a home livable. On Maya's second birthday, we started the story box. I labeled it in a plain black marker. Inside we put, a simple family tree with first names only, and a line through relationships we've chosen not to maintain. A note from Jonah explaining what an order of protection is written like a picture book. Some people need space to be safe. A judge helps us keep that space. A letter from Mark about courage. and the day he decided to move out, told like a fishing story because that's his language. A photo of Mara holding me in the diner bathroom years ago with a private caption on the back, "Someone always helps you wash the blood away." The sealed envelope with the rehab certificate for when Maya is legally an adult and asks for more context. A small sunflower charm just like the one Tasha gave me at the reception, the shield I wore on a thin chain tucked under my shirt. We keep the box on the top shelf of the closet in our room. It's not for now. It's for when questions get longer than why. It's proof that we made choices, and that those choices bought her a quieter childhood than mine. Years don't stop just because one side of your family tree is a tangle. Time still does what it does. We measured it in doll shoes, abandoned under the couch, in scribbles on the grocery list, in seasons on the maple out front. Maya learned to jump, and then to land without falling. She learned please, and later, and the very specific way to ask Mark for pancakes shaped like stars. She learned that Camilla's kitchen always smells good, that Eric knows the names of tools, that Ava's plants are friends, that Piper believes any problem can be solved with tape and a plan. She learned that Mara tells the truth fast and hugs slow. She learned that Grace keeps her word. She learned that Jonah shows up every time with steady eyes and warm hands. And me, I learned the difference between vigilance and fear. I still check the cameras at night, but not like I'm waiting for a ghost. I still keep the folder by the front door, but I don't touch it unless there's mail. I can sit on the porch and read while Maya draws circles with chalk on the steps, and not feel the old pull to turn every sound into a warning. Mark married Grace in their backyard, under a string of lights that blinked like sleepy stars. Maya tossed petals and then threw the whole basket because moderation is a skill for later. Carla wasn't there. No shadows at the gate. Just good food, a short speech, and dancing that looked like people practicing happiness. Nani's recipes live on in the messy way. Good recipes do, notes in the margins. Add more lemon stains that tell you which one you make the most. On her birthday, Maya and I made the lemon cake. We ate it at the table with the quilt Nani promised me years ago, spread under our elbows, the one with crooked stitches that tell the truth about hands that were tired and kept working anyway. One afternoon, I found the old bracelet Piper slipped me when I moved out of Carla's house, a thin band with a tiny knot. I realized I hadn't thought about packing in a rush in months. I slipped the bracelet on and felt the knot not as a symbol of captivity, but as a reminder ties can be chosen. The court renewed the order again at the 3-year mark, this time for 5. It took 1 hearing and 10 minutes. Our attorney called it clean. The judge didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. The record is the record. Carla had a new attorney who tried a new angle and gave up by page 2. Afterwards, Jonah kissed my forehead in the courthouse lobby and said lunch like this was any other Tuesday. That's the dream I didn't know to order when I was a kid, ordinary on schedule. A week later, the detective called to say Carla had moved out of state to stay with a distant relative. I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness for all the ways she won't change, and something like calm. People think closure is a door slamming. Sometimes it's a moving truck and a silence that doesn't enthrall you anymore. Tonight after bath and books, Maya asked her first real question about the hole in the family tree. She's 3.5 and smarter than my fear. "Who is your mom?" she said, head tilted, eyes serious. I had practiced, not a script, a posture. Honest, brief kind around the edges, but not blurry. "She's someone who hurt me," I said. "We don't see her because my job is to keep you safe." "Does she say sorry?" Maya asked. "Because she knows that word. We use it right in this house. Not in a way that fixes it," I said. "Some people say words. We look at what they do." She thought about that for a beat longer than her age, then nodded like a person filing a rule. "Okay," she said, and reached for the book about the little girl who grows a sunflower taller than the fence. We turned off the light, and she fell asleep with the book open on her chest. After I tucked her in, I sat on the porch with Jonah. The night smelled like damp earth and the distant metallic sound of someone dragging a garbage bin up a driveway. "We're doing it," he said softly. Not a pep talk, a fact. I laid my head on his shoulder and let that simple sentence be the ending I didn't get when I was 14. When I hand Maya her story one day, I won't open with punches or police reports. I'll start with the decision that changed the angle of everything, a signature on a lease A. Yes to a man who showed up on Tuesdays, a refusal to let drama decide what dinner looks like. I'll tell her that people are more than their worst day and also accountable for it. I'll tell her that love is not a rescue mission, it's a practice of arriving. I'll tell her that boundaries are not walls to keep joy out, they're trellises that help the right things grow. If she asks for details, I'll show her the folder and the box in that order. The folder is for the record, the box is for the heart. And if she asks the question, I can feel coming, even now. Will I ever meet your mom? I'll answer with the truth that respects her future. When you're grown, the choice will be yours. I'll tell you everything I know. You can read her letter if you want. The door to our home stays shut. The door to your decisions opens when you're ready. Whatever you choose, I'll be here. That's the end I wish someone had given me at 13 in the back seat of a car I didn't know how to get out of. That's the gift I can hand her now. You've been with me since I walked out of a bakery and decided to stop auditioning for someone else's idea of family. You saw the doorway glare, the porch pounding the courtroom, the casserole, the baby's first laugh, the last letter. Maybe you're sitting in a quiet house trying to decide if you're allowed to choose quiet on purpose. Here's my answer, refined by nights I thought I'd break, and mornings I didn't. You're allowed. You're allowed to leave a table where you keep getting cut. You're allowed to build a life with people who don't make you pay for their pain. You're allowed to write a short version that doesn't center the one who hurt you. We made a family on purpose. We kept the kind people close. We put a safe wall between us and the hurt. That's how we stayed whole. Would you have done the same?